Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the LilyGrace Lifestyle Podcast. I'm so excited because I have my guest today that I met a while back when I worked at the Element Group. Her name is Dawn, and she is here to talk about her life mantras and marketing. So, without further ado, thank you so much for coming on today, Dawn.
My pleasure. I am so honored you asked me to be on this with you, Lily Grace. You are just this like little rock star. I gotta watch out for you. She's coming your way as Lily Grace. I'm telling you, she's gonna take the world by storm. I've been watching her for years now. So
Oh, that's really sweet.
uh,
That's so sweet. And like I said, when I met you the first time, I was like, I feel like we're so similar. We're on the same page. We have a very strong mindset, and I just had to have you on. So, the first question that I always ask my guests is what defines your lifestyle?
so super good question. What defines my lifestyle this year? And I'm gonna probably like mix this in with the next question you're gonna ask. So we'll just maybe merge them in together.
Sounds good.
My lifestyle is really it's gonna be sound funny because your name, but I believe in two things with my lifestyle is being the light and holding grace. I like literally have a coffee mug at work that says I run on coffee and grace.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really about knowing that everybody has this story, and particularly in the last year, you have to give people a little more grace, probably than we're all accustomed to, and we're all usually better for that, whether we realize that in the moment or afterwards. Being the light, bringing a positive mindset as often as you can. No one's perfect. It's impossible to do it 100% of the time. And showing grace is really basically at the core of my lifestyle.
Wow. I can so see that because I think you emulate both of those things. So that's just fantastic. And where do you think those two things came from? Like, how did you grow up? And like, what are the things or events in your life that really steered you to where you are today?
Sure. I was really fortunate that I grew up with all four grandparents really involved in my life. And my parents are from very different places originally. Like my dad is from New England, Boston. And his parents were very, very active in like the big business of Boston at the time. My dad's dad ran Colonial Meatpacking Company
Wow.
back in the day, and my grandmother was like a big time social worker in Roxbury and Dorchester. She was like a little Jewish lady that just took care of all these children um, that needed guidance and a social worker to advocate for them. So that's where my dad grew up. And then my mom, she's a Southern girl. Like she grew up in the Carolinas and then at one point in New York. Um, and like her parents were both military. My dad's dad was also military, and my dad and my mom were military.
Mm.
So my dad was Army. My mom was an Army nurse. Her mom was an Army nurse. Her dad was an Army officer, as was my dad's dad. So like that's where their kind of like similarities were. But like my dad was Jewish, my mom was not. So there was like back in the day, there were a lot of issues surrounding like them deciding to get married.
Mm.
Um, and then at the end, everything the dust settled, you have grandkids, and that seems to like bring everybody back together. And there, that was me and my sister. Um, and so because I had such this deep influence from my grandparents, like that generation, they just operated a whole lot differently than what we see today. Not
Mm.
that there's anything wrong with today's generation, but when you have the wisdom of multiple generations behind you raising you, like they showed me the world literally. Like my
Mm.
dad's parents took me all over the world, like
Wow.
Germany, France, Tokyo, Hong Kong, like everywhere they could take me. And they had like other grandkids, and my aunt and uncle worked for the State Department, so they were always getting stationed in new places, which is when my
Mhm.
grandparents would tag me along to go visit my cousins in these foreign lands.
Wow.
And so, like one particular example that I can share with you, which really changed my life because of this opportunity to travel and because of the wisdom of my grandparents. First of all, before I get to that, just a quick side tour. So my great grandparents were also like pretty spectacular. My one grandfather started a Jewish temple congregation in Cleveland, Ohio, and they welcomed everyone. So we were always reared with like seeing beyond people's skin tones and like
Mhm.
whatever, as long as like we took care of each other, all were welcome. So that's that mentality I was raised with. Like it just was. And then this particular grandfather was also an advisor to presidents and was sent out during wars to advise people like generals and presidents, and like we have pictures of him with multiple presidents, and he debated
Wow.
with Aaron Starrow on the radio in front of 500,000 people on the origin of the species. He was amazing. So like there was like a lot of humility that needed to be had amongst these people who were very relatively public figures during the time. And so there was always a sense of humility, and then that leads me to like this one event that I experienced when I was walking through Tokyo with my grandfather. I was walking down the streets of Tokyo and they were like showing me around, and I was holding his hand, and all of a sudden I looked around me and I was like, whoa, like, Grampy, why is everybody looking at us? And he's like, honey, they're looking at you. They're not used to seeing a blonde haired, blue eyed white person. And I was like, oh, okay. And, I wasn't scared. It was like, just it's like, you are in the minority here. And
Mhm.
so to have that experience at, I think it was 13,
Mhm.
um, really changed my life. And it gave me this whole new perspective. Like, you know, the world is much bigger than we see if we don't
Mhm.
get these experiences. And it was important for me to feel that feeling, and it lent me a great deal of the ability to empathize with
Mm.
people who are also in the minority in other places, right? Um, I think everyone should have that experience. I think the world would be a different place for it.
Mm.
So that's kind of the foundations of my mantra. Like, we treat others as we want to be treated, really foundational basic stuff.
Yes.
My grandmother instilled in me, like, we're always looking out for the best interests of others where we can. People need each other. We
Mhm.
offer help. We recognize the heroes. Everyday heroes don't always like look like celebrities. They're
Mhm.
the people stepping in to speak on behalf of the person who doesn't feel like they have a voice.
Mm.
And we do it with grace and care and as minimal judgment as possible. Like, we don't know what everybody's walking, what path they're walking, and we need to offer grace, and we need to lean in and ask questions and be curious and be kind and be polite. So
Mm.
again, that's part of the nature of that generation, right? Like,
Wow.
you're just raised to not say certain things, or to you know respect other people and to
Mhm.
question them. Like, it wasn't about also being silent. It was like, be curious enough to ask questions in a sensible way so you can learn what the other person is feeling and experiencing.
Mhm.
Try to put yourself there and imagine what it might be like for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or a day. And so that gave me a whole lot of perspective too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that's so incredible that you got to travel that much when you were younger because of your family. And I think the key thing, especially that stood out to me that I can definitely connect with is grandparents.
Ah,
Um, I no longer have my grandparents, but when I was younger, they were integral part of my family. And I truly feel like I'm a combination of my Nana and my grandmother. And I just feel like, again, the traditional like aspect of life that they had and just the mindset they had back then is kind of what I carry throughout my life because I always felt like they were such kind people and so responsible and also kind of daredevilish, but you're right, it's like a different world back then, but it's kind of cool to carry it out through your life, and I see that in you, so that's incredible.
thank you. And I'm trying to instill that in my own children now.
Mhm.
Like, sharing with them about their grandparents. Like, my grandmother's still alive. She just turned 100 this year.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
congratulations.
it's just like losing her memory. Like, she doesn't recognize me anymore. It's very sad because
It's
she was
hard,
like
yeah.
my dad's mom. Like, she's the one who I spent probably the most time with of all my
Um,
grandparents. And but she still gets up and walks every day and like
aw,
speaks to her like retirement community where she lives and like shares like the Hanukkah story and
aw,
gets up and like just speaks so eloquently. And she's like, everyone loves her because she is the light. Like, she
mm,
taught me that. Like,
yeah.
everyone who's ever crossed my grandmother's path has only one thing to say about her. Like, she is just kind, and her name is Joy. Like, literally,
Aw,
her name is Joy.
wow.
So she lives truly by her name. And how lucky are you and I to have that experience? Like, it's unusual, I think.
Mhm,
Unfortunately, it's unusual.
definitely.
But man, it changed my life for
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
in some ways.
Wow. That touches me so much, and I can definitely see how you are the way you are, and it just all makes sense, and, like, it's again, it's so cool that you got to travel, like, that's incredible. Tokyo when you were 13, like, wow.
Yeah.
So, can we get more into now, like, what you went to school for, and let's focus a little bit more on that aspect of your life, and how did
Sure.
you get there?
So I went to the University of Vermont, and apparently I graduated the year you were born, or the year before you were born. Now I know that.
It's
Just so everybody's clear, like, I'm a lot a bit older than Lily
not
Grace.
that much older, no.
So yeah, I went to the University of Vermont. It was a great experience. I was a collegiate debater there, and I wasn't there to debate. I kind of fell into it, and I'm so lucky that I did. I actually learned. I'm not sure if this is okay to say, but I'm going to say it. Like, I learned way more as a collegiate debater than in any, no, not any, than a majority of my classes that I took there, because
Mhm,
it's immersion learning, and you're actually like
right.
speaking what you learn, and you're making arguments about it, and you're like looking at all sides of these scenarios. And like, they were
Mhm.
big topics like Mexican indigenous people and like NAFTA agreements and like really incredible stuff. So
Wow.
I started, I think this is like a statistic, but I started out pre-med. I was a biology major. I wanted to be a
Oh.
when I first got there. And then I didn't have much success in some of my science classes, and I'm like, I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. Maybe I need to tax. So I looked at like speech communication and pathology, and I changed my major to that for a little bit. And then, the more I got into debate, I was like pretty competitive with debate for 2 solid years. Like, went to nationals and like competed at a very high level. I started to really reconsider my major for the final time. And third time's a charm. I decided to major in political science with a double minor in philosophy and sociology and a concentration in crime, law, and justice. And that's how I
Wow.
finished out. I didn't debate my whole way through because it's a pretty grueling um, level of debate. Not that it was bad. It was just like, whoa, I probably like might want to explore some other opportunities that UVM has to offer. So I did
Mhm.
that. I put myself through school. So that was the other thing,
Wow.
like, working and debating and school, and like, it was a lot. So I had a lot to do in 4 years. And then I graduated pre law and decided to take a year working to rebuild my financial bucket. Um, because I put myself through school. I'm like, okay, so if I'm going to go to law school, that's more debt.
Mm.
I probably need to just position myself with some savings. And I took a year and then ended up enrolling in a law school online.
Oh.
And realized like, oh, I really want to like go to an actual law school. And I ended up enrolling at Mass School of Law in Andover.